everybody, and welcome to the Byram Hills Board of Education meeting for March 6, 2018. Please join us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How many times did you do that today, kids? That makes number 2?
Did we do it right? Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Exciting evening at the district office. We're joined by a lot of our administrators, and we're going to have 2 special reports. One is our budget, and the other one is a math pathways, which we'll talk to in a second. And I hope everyone survived the nor'easter and is hunkering down for the next one. So just for the record, I called the meeting to order at 7:20, and we went into executive session and we discussed item 3.1, personnel matter, individual employee, 3.2, contract matter, retired employee, 3.3, contract matter, individual employee, 3.4, contract matter, consultant agreement, 3.5, let me see, 3.5, contract matter, individual employee. We're going to table 3.6 for another meeting, which is 3.6 is contract matter, individual employee. We're going to table that for a later meeting. And we talked about 3.7, committee matter, emergency response team. Why is my computer? What am I doing here?
Want to borrow mine?
No, got it. It's me. It's not it. It's me. Okay. At this time, are there any comments from the public of any matters not on our agenda? Okay, hearing none. We had a couple revisions to our agenda. One was the executive item that I said we're taking off and we're going to talk about next week. And we are flopping 2 items under our special reports. We're going to just transpose item 10 and item 9. So we're going to start with the presentation of the administration's proposed budget, and then we will do the math pathways program discussion. So with those changes, can I have a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay. And I should mention, we're a little short board member-wise. Laura Stengel could not be here, and Mike Sanders could not be here.
We fined them each $20.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve our consent agenda for personnel, special services, and business?
So moved.
And a second? Second. Okay, and all in favor? Okay, and we just approved a bunch of different regular business items, but there were also some special business items that we just approved, and we want to highlight them. And I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent to highlight 2 special items.
Okay, very excited to do this. Tonight, something amazing just happened. We just appointed 2 people to new positions, and someone who is new to Byram Hills and new to us, but certainly not new to guidance departments or schools. We welcome Erin Brown. Welcome, Erin. Erin will be our new guidance counselor at the high school and comes to us from Bethel, Connecticut, where she is currently the guidance chairperson. So what I loved about our conversation when Erin and I met is we were talking about the importance of making sure that you are here to support students for what they want and the families for what they want regarding this college application process. But that also it's incredibly important to know these children through school and to support them in the way a guidance counselor should be supporting students. And I found that she had that really nice blend of understanding that both are equally important and understanding our community. So we are looking forward to having you here starting at the end of this summer, and I'm sure you'll be in some time over the summer. I like that I see so many people are here supporting you. Mike McGrath, the chairperson of the department, Chris Walsh, the principal of the building, and I think your 2 assistant principals are on that side also here, which is beautiful to support you and welcome you. And I think what you're going to hear in the next employee I'm going to talk about is going to perhaps really solidify for you that you made the right decision in coming to our Byram family. Yes, welcome. We're excited to have you here. And we had another interesting consent agenda item. I would like to ask any one of the 4 children in the front, can anybody tell me what exciting just happened? What do we have, Finn?
A new principal for Wampus.
Finn, you're awesome. That's exactly right. So Finn, I want to talk about your mom for just a minute. Peggy now is the only person in the district, besides me, who will have held 5 different positions. Giving tenure up multiple times. But you know, that means you're making a commitment to Byram Hills. So your mom started out as a teacher. She became an assistant principal. She became the principal at Coman Hill Elementary School. And we stole her up here at the district office to be the assistant to the superintendent. And now she will leave here and she will go to Wampus Elementary School to take on the challenges, exciting challenges of that school as their new principal. So that makes 5 different times that your mom has moved in this district to do every job that she knew needed to be done and has done it right. She is really so incredibly valuable to us and to all the kids. And I know that means that she sometimes is with the 600 kids here in a building instead of with the basketball team of McInerney's at home. But we appreciate it, and she's been incredibly supportive of our schools and the reason why we're so successul. You don't have to leave with that, baby. We're used to this. We're in school. It doesn't matter. Bells could ring. We'll keep talking. It's good. So I just want to say to the administrators and people who are here also to support Peggy. We know how much it means that she is going to go and continue the work that Deb has done at Wampus. And Judy, she will be a great partner to Judy. The teachers are overjoyed that they know that they're going to continue to be in good hands. So Peggy, although I don't want to lose Deb, I am very happy that you are going to be going there. Congratulations and welcome here. And now we have, your parents are here and your aunt, which one?
Oh, that's funny, that's my sisters.
Wait, your mother, your father, your
Sister, my older
sister.
sister.
Oh, you didn't get any aunts this time.
I told them they should.
I think the last time we had
I
5.
told them don't.
The last time we had half the audience filled in.
They're going to be on every other position.
Yeah.
My husband is at a championship basketball game with our 8th grade son.
I noticed someone is wearing a New York Rangers jersey in the front row. Did you clear that with the Board of Education? Do you know wearing a Ranger jersey has special meaning in this room? Do you have any idea about that? Or you just put it on just to see what would happen? Ah, right under the bus, huh? Well, good for you.
Mr. Schulman used to play for the Rangers, but I'll tell you that story another time. So, congratulations,
We're thrilled to have you.
Peggy.
Peggy, thank you so much for
Peggy,
taking this on.
You really are, and for so many years, have been such a star here at Byram Hills. In everything you've done, you've left it far better than you found it. You're going to a great school to begin with. That is just terrific, and we just know when you leave it in 2035 or whenever, it'll even be better than it is. But to your children who are sitting in the front row, you should realize how special it is what just happened to your mom, that getting this job is really pretty cool, and you should be really proud of her. Not only because she's your mom, and I'm sure she's a great mom, but because in her business, in her chosen profession, she makes a difference every day, and a difference for the better. So be proud of your mom, give her special hugs and kisses tonight because she deserves it, okay? Thank you.
What job do you think we should have her do next year so you can come back?
Be careful what they say, right? I want to just highlight just a couple other things that we approved also on consent. Well, while you're all here, you might as well celebrate this with us too. We accepted a couple donations from our Monk Baseball League and from the parents of the Byram Hills Girls Lacrosse. We accepted donations that are going to be put towards spring training for our athletes, so we want to thank them. And we also accepted a grant from the Byram Hills Education Foundation, who partnered with the Boosters and the PTSA in supporting girls in sports. So thanks to all those organizations and to our community that helped support those funds as well. So we are going to continue on with our meeting, and you're all more than welcome to stay.
Which of course you're eager to
So
do.
if you want to get ready for your snow day, but
Did you want to say anything before we let everybody go about your appointment? Seriously, you can.
No, just thank you. I'm excited.
Well, we're thrilled. Want to take a moment just to...
Thank you
We're
for
gonna-
sharing your mom with all of us. She's very nice. We think she's a rock star.
We look forward to working with her.
yeah, just take a recess. We'll take just a quick recess, and we'll be right back. Thank you. We're going to start back on item 10, which is special report number 2. We're going to skip ahead to number 2, and then we'll come back to number 1. So this is the presentation of the administration's proposed 2018-2019 budget, and I am turning it right over to our esteemed superintendent.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. January 10th was actually our first budget meeting, our first budget hearing, and that was the night that we heard from the principals about how they were aligning their budgets to their goals in their buildings. Tonight's presentation for the administration's proposed budget and budget development process for 18-19 school year is going to be presented. First, I want to thank the administration for coming. We have this secret society of administrators, and we all know how much this kind of support means. Not just that you spent so much time laboring over this budget, but the fact that you want to come here and support this school district to have the programs that you think are important is really valuable to me. So thank you for coming. And also thank you for developing as lean of a budget as you can without sacrificing programs for our children. I'm going to speak more about the proposed budget in a moment, but first I will turn it over to Mia for the Budget Committee, who is going to speak about our budget timeline. Are you jealous?
I'll do it.
And important, she's prepped, and important guidelines. So Mia.
Hi, everybody. We're going to focus today on the budget development process. We had our first budget hearing on January 9th, and tonight is the administration's proposed budget, where the principals give their overview. March 20th is budget hearing 2, and March 27th is budget hearing 3. Those are important because that's the public's chance to give any input if they want to. April 17th is budget hearing 4, and April 24th is the adoption of the budget. May 8th is the final budget hearing 5, where we review the full budget before the May 15th budget vote at Crittenden. And very important to the board are the budget guidelines, and we try to follow the guidelines of being fiscally sound, responsible, read from the slide, controlling expenditure growth and taking into account the board's goals, enrollment projections, maintaining quality and the needs of the educational programs and facilities, our staffing needs, compliance with all federal and state mandates, revenue and expenditure projections and factors, and review of debt services and investments. And finally, our budget guidelines can best be described in the statement. The board and administration will continue efforts of communication, outreach, to sustain and build community support and understanding. Back to Jen.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you. I just want to note that regarding communication, I'm also going to be presenting the budget at the next 4 principals' coffees. There will, in addition, be a Budget Information Committee meeting that will be held here on April 19th at 7 o'clock as well. And our principals' coffees are now televised, so giving the public as many opportunities as possible to learn about our budget. And our administration's proposed budget, I will be presenting tonight with Mr. Jim Reese, who is our interim business assistant superintendent. And Jim has been with us for the entire year, but I think it's important for the public to know what an asset that Jim has been to us in this budget development process. Jim retired from a district in Westchester, and since that retirement has also completed 2 interim assistant positions in other schools. came highly recommended to us by Greg Carlson, and just has been invaluable to us in this process. So I feel very comforted in telling the public that we have somebody who has been an experience of school budgets for many years and has had quite a take on our budget that has really been beneficial to us. So Jim is going to be joining me. Thank you, Jim. And the next budget, our proposed budget for 2018-19, you will see that in 2017-18, our budget was $90,590,230. Our proposed budget for 2018-19, $92,347,680. That is a 1.9% increase from the last year. The budget was prepared by the administration and reflects this 1.9% increase. The public might be asking us, why do we have any increases at all during the last 5 years when we have seen a steady enrollment decline? And I think it's a fair question to ask. The 2014-15 school budget actually had a 4.6% increase at the time. But the answer is that there will always be some level of increases to account for some of our major drivers, which are contractual salaries and benefits. There will always be an increase in cost to operate our buildings, our facilities, our transportation. And this is the same story that you will hear in every school. But this year, our proposed increase at 1.9% is largely driven by increases in costs we don't control. We have health insurance up 3.4%, teachers' retirement system up 13.2% from last year, Social Security up 5.4%. These uncontrolled costs account for over 1% of this budget, or close to $1 million. So without those costs that we cannot control, our budget-to-budget increase actually would have been similar to last year's 0.8% budget, which was the lowest we had in 5 years, and a budget that reflected a significant reduction in faculty and staff. So despite the 1.9%, I am proud of how lean this budget is. Despite the uncontrolled costs, we have to control costs that are within our abilities. So as such, I'm happy to report that our proposed levy is $920,227 below the tax levy limit. I don't know that we've ever been that far below the tax levy limit before. So we are proposing a 3.4% tax levy increase on a permissible 4.6% tax levy. So when you look at numbers, I think it's important to look at those two pieces. What are our uncontrollable costs and what are things we can control and how are we controlling them? So the administrator's budget continues the vision. In addition to justifying costs, I think it's important to continue the vision of the district. We all know that. We're responsible for providing our students with opportunities. Our budget permits initiatives and it permits enhancements to our programs, like the new math program and the Global Scholars program that you've been hearing us talk about all year. It sets our students apart from their peers. This means we have to remain robust in our programs and our instruction. We have to have a lens toward innovation. I look at all the robotics, the engineering, the arts, the English elective courses that were not even a consideration 5 years ago, and we are doing that with the budget we're presenting today. Take a look at the first and third bullet up there. I'd like to highlight them. One as a nod to my predecessor, who was famous for this bullet, and he's correct. Every student in K-11 will have the opportunities afforded to our graduating seniors. We believe in that, like a mission in Byram Hills, and our budget has to support it. And the third bullet, that all of the programs that we talk about are under curriculum and instruction and academic departments on our website. And I encourage anybody who hasn't been there yet to look at them. And now I want to explain how the proposed budget was developed. The preparation of our budget involves an analysis of data on programs and enrollment and previous budget and current needs. But we also have to consider all those mandates and obligations that I've been speaking about. We've been focusing, fortunately, on reserve funds. That's really helped us to offset a debt service that we have. People unfamiliar with the debt service, we took out quite a bit of debt many years ago when we were putting additions on our schools. We've been paying that debt off over time. And fortunately, our reserve funds have been able to help us bridge the gap and not raise our taxes, creating tax spikes. It's worthy to note right now for the Byram Hills community that 8 of our neighboring schools are currently going out for bonds, ranging from $9 million to $80 million, some which will heavily impact taxpayers in those towns. And the budget we are presenting is not showing that we are going to be needing to do anything like that. It is a fiscally sound, responsible budget. Our biggest challenge now has been how are we going to be offsetting reductions in revenue without burdening taxpayers? People in the community are concerned. What could be happening with salt tax? What could be happening with tax levies or with pilots or anything else that might impact this community? And although we'll talk about revenue later in another meeting, I just want to reiterate that we are going to be coming well below the tax cap to impact taxpayers the least amount possible. It's important to us as a community. We also look at district enrollment. This is the steady decline that the good demographers have been telling us about and have been correct about. The decline is expected to level, although enrollment is always a moving target. Remember, we had approximately 50 additional students this year than we had the year before. It's important when we look at enrollment on the next slide by building that you see how this actually impacts us. From the 16-17 to the 17-18 school years, we lost 22 students K-12. At the same time that we lost those 22 students, we also did not replace 5 faculty members. So we are trying really hard to make sure that our enrollment declines are being met with our staffing. But it's important to know that 22 students K-12 is not a class. And it is very difficult to make those adjustments. And for the 17-18 to the 18-19 school year, you're really only looking at a 33 student difference based on the demographers report. That is K-12 also. So have we adjusted for the enrollment declines? What I said last year, we had 5 teacher reductions. We also had 1 administrator and 1 staff member last year. This year, you will see that we do need another shared aid for a student, but our secondary school teacher, we will experience another staff decrease. And those staff decreases will happen as our enrollment continues to decline. But we have been able to match them with retirements. This is actually a retiring employee that we do not need to fill the position of. We never want large numbers in our classes though, so we have to remain true to adjusting the staffing when it's possible. And more of a focus on staff resources. It's not just about having lean budgets, but it's about having budgets that respect our goal. We need to provide students with the highest quality education possible. Right now, we are under negotiations with every person working in this district with the exception of the administration. That's a lot of negotiations happening at one time. We appreciate the support of our unions as we develop this budget, and we appreciate that employees are critical to our success. And we look forward to good negotiations with them this year. So what does the budget include? If I'm a taxpayer who cares about the value of schools, or I'm a parent who cares about the value of my child's education, this is what I want to hear after the numbers are explained. Take a look at the first bullet, all the programs and services that have supported student success. Statistics show that 100% of our students from 2017 attended college. The special recognition document on our website, and that is presented for you today, it's one of my favorite reads, shows that in 2001, only 20% of our graduating seniors were accepted to the top 11% of colleges. Last year, 68% of our students were accepted at Tier 1 and 2 colleges, with Tier 1 hitting an all-time acceptance rate of 60%. Never seen before in our history. Superior college admissions is met with student recognition. I end every board meeting with about 15 minutes of describing the success of our students and faculty. Superior college admissions mean that we continue to rank in the top 100 high schools in U.S. by Newsweek and Forbes magazine, and Standard & Poor's still rates us as a value-added school. And our middle school ranked #1 in New York State in ELA and math at grades 6 and 7. And our district is in the top 5% of districts for our Regents exam scores. That is some robust accolades to our students and our programs. And robust programs like science research. We have 104 Regeneron scholars, 19 finalists. I think our students tell our Byram Hills budget story for us. And now I want to turn it over to Jim. He's going to present the proposed budget by component and by program with an explanation of our debt service, which is actually a good story. I've never seen a good debt service story, but we have one. And Jim will recap our major budget drivers and give us a lens into the next presentation at the next meeting, which you don't have to come to, which is on revenue.
Thank you. We'll take a look at the numbers. First, the board did receive a notebook at your place this evening. That has some very specific information, line by line actually. What you're looking at here is more of a 20,000 foot view of the budget. By New York State law, we do have to present the budget in 3 parts, and those parts being program, capital, and administrative. And you can see that the budget increase, $1,750,000, approximately 1.94%. Most of that goes to the program. 70% of that goes to the program, which it should. We're a school district. Our job is to educate students. Primarily, a school budget, 75 to even 80% of any school budget you look at is salary and benefits. So that's the lion's share of the budget is program. Then we do have capital, which we'll get into a little bit, and also administrative. Going from the 20,000 foot view down to probably a 10,000 foot view, we take a look at the program. Again, you can see the part of the budget program makes up $64 million. We had an overall increase in program of 2.7%. That was the largest increase of the 3 areas, which again is important. We want to focus our priorities on instruction, and you can see the components that make up our program. It's teaching regular school, which includes salary, supplies, materials, textbooks, the tuition, BOCES programs, special education, same thing, salaries, legal services. We moved some appropriation for legal services this year into special education, tuition costs, BOCES costs, and then right down the line, so school, library and audiovisual, computer-assisted instruction, guidance services, health services, psychological services. Our co-curricular activities are under program, interscholastic athletics. Pupil transportation, now that's an interesting one because right up until this point you're looking at all the instructional related issues, but the state wants us to code pupil transportation with the exception of our bus purchases, our vehicles under program. So you can see that we do have a program component under program here. And then employee benefits, we break out the employee benefits for the people that are coded in these areas. And you can see that there was an increase there, and basically, as was mentioned earlier, a lot of the increase is due to the teacher retirement system. And I'll have a few, I have a mention in one of the slides later on about that. The second area, capital, includes our operation and maintenance, or facilities, buildings and grounds it's sometimes referred to. And again, under operation of plant, it's our salaries for the custodians, our cleaners, substitutes, utility costs for our fuel oil, electric, gas, water, sewer, and also security is covered under the operation of plant, as well as supplies and materials. Maintenance of plant, you can see a very small increase there. Again, salaries for our maintenance department, grounds department, supplies. We also, the district also carries about $680,000 for maintenance projects, and I think this is outstanding. I've worked in several districts, as was mentioned earlier. 3 actually since I've retired, so not much of a retirement, I guess. But the district here carrying that kind of an appropriation from a maintenance project is outstanding because you stay ahead of the game, and that's why you're looking at probably not doing a bond proposition right away. Some districts defer maintenance, defer maintenance, defer maintenance, and then all of a sudden you have a bond proposition that you're looking at in order to address maintenance projects. I do have a list of those. We can take, you have a list in your notebook. We can take a look at those later also. But that's outstanding that we have that appropriation here. Includes insurance. We did have a slight decrease there. It was more of a transfer from this code to transportation because we do code whatever we can transportation expenses under our transportation code because we get transportation aid on it. It's minimal aid, 6.5%, but still, it's any dollar that we can put under transportation and get that 6.5% back is a good thing. The pupil transportation under capital is our bus purchases. We're looking at maintaining the same level of bus purchases, $450,000 for next year. And then employee benefits for the people that are included in these areas. The debt service piece, you can see that is dropping off. $5.99 million is what we're budgeting now. That's a decrease of $157,000. As you pay off these bonds, typically your payments get less and less each year. So you can see a slight decrease there. And there is another slide we'll take a look at for debt service. And then again, the board is to be commended for this capital asset preservation plan. A lot of districts, again, will cut this. The district is budgeting $1 million to deal with, these are basically our projects that are not maintenance as much as they are improvements to the district or replacements for the district. And we do have some examples, again, in your book, but an example, we are redoing the theater in the high school. That would be an example of capital asset preservation. That's a project that needs to be submitted to the State Education Department for approval. And that has been submitted now. We're looking at receiving the approval hopefully before spring. The approval process is fairly long, but that is a project that we hope to be doing this summer. And the administrative component. The administrative component covers basically everything else in the budget that wasn't mentioned before, starting right with the 1010 code, the Board of Education. Covers the central administration, superintendent's cost, finances, the business office. We have legal expenses, personnel office, information, BOCES, capital and administrative costs. And then the administrative costs related to curriculum development, staff development, supervision, the building principals, the building codes. And then we do have our department chairs, which are budgeted in this area also, and then administrators in each of the other areas, special education, technology, guidance, interscholastic athletics. We do code part of the assistant superintendent for business salary under transportation, again, because we're eligible to get the 6.5% aid on that.
Jim, the TRS is double digit this year. Can you remind us what ERS?
Pardon me?
What is ERS this year?
The ERS varies. There's by tier. So the early tiers, tier 1, tier 2, we have there's very few people still working that are in the tier 1, tier 2 kind of thing. But those are up around 14-15%. And then the later tiers, the tier 5, tier 6 are a little bit lower. They're around 9%. And they're fairly stable at this point compared to last year. What Susan, went through and actually did an employee by employee and tier to project a rate for next year. So overall, I think you'll see in the budgets, you'll see some decreases in the ERS. ERS is still a concern for us, even though the district does have a reserve, ERS is a concern for us. We do have an ERS reserve, so if we do have spikes in that area, we do have money reserved that we can deal with them. But on an overall basis, from what was budgeted in 2017-18 to 18-19, you'll see a decrease in that area.
Jim, and also you have the computer-assisted instruction is in both it's in administrative and also in program.
Right.
Say it again.
Yes, the under administration, that would be the administrative salaries related to the technology program. And the program, that would be, a lot of the program is BOCES services. We subscribe to, I think the BOCES contract proposed for next year is about $1.4 million in services. And then we also do our IPAs through BOCES, the installment purchase agreements. And we're looking at, we have a very small one that's falling off this year. Those are laddered, usually 4 or 5 years. And then as one falls off, you add another one. We have a relatively small appropriation falling out of the budget this year, and we're replacing that with about $100,000 IPA, which will allow us to purchase a fair amount of infrastructure improvements. So that's in the program piece. And the staffing, the techs and aides are also in the program piece. Supplies, materials, computer software, those kind of things.
If you look at the last 3 pages, the 2 large expense items that are rising faster than the overall increase seem to be, the ones that are large, are employee benefits under program and the program students with disabilities. The employee benefits, I'm sure a lot of that's being driven by healthcare and TRS.
Right.
I guess, and we can either do it now or we can certainly defer it to have a more detailed discussion at the next meeting, but in the students with disabilities category, is the increase being driven by, is it the number of students that are classified with disabilities? Is it the intensity of the classifications, or is it a difference in terms of our approach, or just to understand that line item more would be helpful?
Okay. Let me go back and get some additional information
Yeah, of course.
for you. That's, but in your book here, there's some very specific, again, comparisons, so you can see where the changes are occurring in that area. And tuition is one of the areas in that. So, but I can get you additional information, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the 3 areas, and then moving into our bond refunding. This is a slide which is very impressive. A lot of the business officials do this. When you go out and debt service is typically related to a construction project, and then you usually start out financing it with bands, and then you move to bonds, and depending on what the interest rate is when you lock in the bonds, at some point during the term of the bond, it may make sense to take a look at the interest rates and try to refinance. Now, it's called refunding here.
We've done that a few times.
We have done that, and it's the refunding is the same as a person refinancing their house on their mortgage. Okay, so under the little blue lines there, that's our annual savings, and you can see that goes out through the life of the bond. That's about $182,000. If you look at that cumulative, going back from 2012-13, that's the first little bar. The red bar going up is the cumulative effect of that. So you can see over that period, 2012-13 out to 2025-26, the district is saving approximately $2.2 million, which we don't have to tax the community for, because back in 2012-13, the board and administration chose to refund this bond.
I think we should give a little shout out to Greg
Yeah.
Carlson for that, because he was very active in the refinancing world and really assisted us in doing as well as we did. He was helpful starting with the bond anticipation notes and all the way through, but refinancing was really his bailiwick, and he did a nice job for us for that.
And absolutely, I agree. And also, it helps that the district has a AAA Moody's rating.
Yes.
One of the few districts in the state. I believe there's maybe 5 or 6 districts in the state that have the AAA, and Byram Hills is one. And again, that's a real plus when you're doing, a refunding, or actually when you just go out to do a bond or a band sale. I think this is the slide that is most interesting with our debt service. You can see where the little green bars there, funding from the insurance reserve. We do use reserves. We have reserve for insurance, reserve for the employees' retirement system. We have a tax cert reserve. We have an unemployment reserve. And the district here, the tallest line starting on the left, that's the existing obligation, the debt service that the district has on an annual basis. So going way back to 13-14, the actual debt service was about $7 million. And you can see that it steps down, because as you're paying a bond off, your payments are going down over the course of the years. And then starting back in 13-14, the district used reserves in order to help fund this. So again, if you have money on hand, most business officials, you find, are fairly conservative when they're developing a budget. So at the end of the year, you want to make sure that you underspend the budget. Rule of thumb is you underspend the budget about 2%. That's the auditors don't have a problem with that at all. And then typically on the revenue side, again, being conservative, and not knowing what the state's going to do, and looking at the state's record for the past 30 years, it's hard to put your trust in what the state's projecting you're going to get for revenue. Fortunately, our revenue from the state is not a very large percentage of the budget, but some of the upstate districts have a bit more of a concern there. But when you do have reserves, this is a great way to use them, because it's basically, you don't want to fund program with reserves. You want to fund one-shots, and because this bond is eventually going to be paid off, it's a great opportunity to use the reserve to bring down what you have to raise in taxes each year. So you can see that as we're using the reserves over the year, our insurance reserve will end up being depleted in a few years, but that bond will drop off the budget also, because it will mature, it will be paid off. So this is a great example of using the reserves. One other thing that I probably should mention here is we do have a capital reserve also that the voters in the district authorized in May, and they authorized establishing a capital reserve in the amount of $10 million and then funding it. The way you fund a reserve is any appropriation. Districts can carry over 4% unappropriated fund balance, and then anything else has to either be returned to the taxpayer the following year, or it can be put into a reserve. So the board proposed a resolution, the voters approved this, so we do have a capital reserve in the amount of $10 million. It's now been funded with about $3.9 million, so that's our current balance in the reserve. Going forward, you can use the reserve similar to your CAP plan to fund projects. Usually the CAP plan, because it's only $1 million, are smaller projects. Maintenance projects are even smaller than that, because we have the $600,000 appropriation. But you get a project like the synthetic turf field that we're looking at, and the track, reconditioning the track. That's a great opportunity to use the capital reserve. We have our architect, one of the board goals is to review all the athletic facilities. They've spent a lot of time looking at the synthetic turf field and also the track. Those are the ones that we would like to prioritize moving forward. I know Steve Thompson was here at one of the board meetings and talked about a list of projects. We want to fast track these because of the condition of the field. We feel that we can get through one more year with the synthetic turf field, but it's showing its age now. And it actually has lasted much longer than a lot of the school districts are experiencing, and that's because of the maintenance that's been happening to the field as we go along. But it is something that needs to be replaced. It is something that needs not only voter authorization, but also SED authorization. SED is notoriously long approval process right now. So what we would like to do is try to fast track these. I would like to bring a proposition to a resolution to the March 20th board meeting and have the board authorize us to pursue the synthetic turf field and the track, and authorize us to use the capital reserve to fund that, and also bring you a secret resolution. We feel there will be no action because it's simply a replacement of in kind. So we would like to bring that March 20th. If the board approves that, then it would be advertised along with our 45-day notice of the budget vote, and it would be a second proposition on your ballot. So we'd have the budget as number one. We'd have this proposition to authorize us to expend money from the capital reserve to replace the synthetic turf, the carpet, and also renovate the track.
That's going to have to be, if we're going to do that, we're going to have to make sure the community understands we're not raising their taxes by doing that.
Exactly.
Because you see a second proposition, the first thing goes, oh boy. But it's not really the case, and we're going to have to explain that.
Yes, and I think it's good that you just established the capital reserve this past year, because that should be in people's minds. Oh yes, we have this capital reserve. A lot of times districts will save up over like 8 or 10 years and then use it to replace the field. I know the Carmel School District, as the board is aware, I sit on the Carmel School Board of Education. The last time we replaced the synthetic turf field a couple of years ago, the district established a capital reserve then for $10 million with the thought that in 10 years we're going to need that in order to replace the carpet again. So they started saving for that. So we're a little bit ahead of the game here with the capital reserve being established and actually funded by $3.9 million. The project cost, the architect is working on that, refining that right now, but I would suspect you're probably between the track and the field, you're probably looking at $1.5 million, and, plus or minus. Don't hold me to that right now. We'll have more information for the March 20th board meeting along with the resolutions. Okay? It's a mouthful, Jim.
We needed that.
I just want to ask you one question. So we have to get it approved, you said government also, that was the other resolution right there.
Yes, yeah, we need voter authorization
Right.
for the project and to expend the money out of the reserve.
Right.
And then the project has to be submitted to the State Education Department.
So we do that after we get the community vote.
You
to
need
move
voter
forward,
authorization,
and then-
right, and then
okay.
send it to the state, right.
So the thinking is it could be a ways before we get that approval, but we could have that deal done by
Well,
next year.
You gotta do it ASAP because it'll sit up at SED for who knows how long for anybody that looks at it.
Right after the
Yeah,
vote is when it would-
yeah,
How much does the state
the plan would be to submit it as soon as we get voter authorization, yes.
Right.
And then, right, the approval process at the state has been taking up to like 9 months. There is a way to fast track that, and we're hoping that because of the nature of the project, we'll be able to fast track that a little bit. It will cost us a little bit more to do that, but we really need the state approval by the February-March timeframe in order to go out to bid, because that's when
To do
people are
it
going
then.
out to bid for those kind of projects. So then the summer of 2019,
will be the.
as soon as school is out, or as soon as we can get access to the field, that's when you would move forward with the project.
Okay.
Scott, did you have a question?
Oh,
okay.
Oh, my question was how long SET's been taking to answer.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, as we mentioned before, some of the major budget drivers, the teacher's retirement system, I went back just because I started as a business official in 1983. I know I look a lot younger than that, but 1980-81, the rate was 23.49 of payroll, 23.49% of payroll. In 1980-81, 83 when I started, it was 22.9% of payroll. Fast forward to 1990, it had dropped to 6.84% of payroll, pretty significant drop. In 2000, it was 0.43. So again, a lot of the funding going into the TRS comes from their investments. So the amount that the district has had to contribute dropped pretty significantly. It bottomed out in 01, 02, 02, 03 at a 0.36%. And then by 2010, it had turned 8.62%, 17, 18, 9.8% as we know, and projecting going forward to a 10.63%. And we've had some discussion about the TRS before and why that's happening and what probably is going to happen over the next couple of years. So I don't think we're going to see much of a reduction in that area. We hope it would stabilize. We hope that some of the investments, again, will help to stabilize the fund and the rate would not increase anymore. A 0.83% increase in the TRS rate, that doesn't sound like much. It's going from 9.8 to 10.63. Doesn't sound like a big increase, but that 0.83 is multiplied times our instructional salary base, which is over $30 million. So you can get an idea of the magnitude of just what a slight change in that rate can do to the budget. We did look at health insurance also. Swiss Chip, their average rate is about 3.6% if you look at each of the 6 different categories that they have: single coverage, 2-person coverage, family coverage, what have you. We did look at Scarsdale. They have their self-funded plan. They're projecting about a 3.2, but they've also have a higher employee contribution rate. They just negotiated that, and they also are changing some of the benefits. NISHIP, which is the state plan, which is another option for us, which we don't want to get into, is 7.5% to 8.6%, depending on which coverage, individual or family coverage. And that is a calendar year plan, so that will increase again in January. So again, we're looking at 6.3, I think overall 3.4, and as opposed to NISHIP 7.5 to 8.6. So I think we're doing very well with Swiss Chip, the cooperative.
On the TRS, there's another push this year to try to pass legislation to allow school districts at their option to establish a TRS reserve, which we can't do today.
Right.
And although it's far from clear whether the legislation will get passed, there's a fair amount of momentum for it
Right.
So it's not an issue for this year, unfortunately, but that's something hopefully that we get some relief on in the future, at least to have that flexibility, because certainly over the course of time, these numbers can get very big.
You're going to see the spikes, and that's the thing. If you can moderate those spikes, that's the important thing. And yeah, it would be great if we could get the state to do a reserve. I know the business officials are lobbying for that also.
Yeah, and the school board association is too.
Right. Yeah. This is an idea of what the health insurance has done over the years. You can see this comes right from Greg's chart here. The linear, the red line is the trend line, and you can see it stays pretty much on trend here. And the last couple of years have been pretty good in terms of overall increases in premium. They've been fairly moderate. Revenues to be presented March 27th. We'll take a look at the state aid. As we said, it's not a great deal of money coming into the budget. It's around 4%.
You know, Scott, you've got to make that deal with the state. We won't take their money if they leave us alone.
Oh, that'd be nice. In all seriousness.
Yeah.
That might help with the mandates. Revenue presentation will also include the use of reserve funds, so we'll take a little bit closer look at some of the information that I've given you already. And we'll also look at the estimated tax rates. As was mentioned, we have filed the tax cap. That's due on March 1st, so we did file that. Maximum levy 4.6%, and I'll run through the whole calculation with you on the March 27th meeting. But the reason that levy, the cap, everybody hears 2% tax cap. It's not a 2% tax cap. There's a number in the formula that cannot exceed 2%, but that's not the whole levy. Okay? So our levy could increase 4.6%, and the reason is we do have a pilot that is that's dropped out, so we're not going to receive the pilot revenue, the payment in lieu of taxes revenue. Instead, that property went back on the tax roll, so the assessed value in that particular town went way up, which will help mitigate the loss of the revenue from the pilot. And again, we'll spend a little bit more time on that at the next board meeting. The tax bill, which is generated by the tax rate, that's what people want to know, because that's the bill that you get in your hand. That's what you have to pay. And it's not going to be 4.6%, and it's not going to be 3.4%. It's going to be lower than that. Okay. Stay tuned. All right. Issues of concern. We are concerned about changes in state aid. Again, we don't get a lot of state aid, but they're proposing caps on the expenditure-driven aid, transportation, building aid, and BOCES aid, which we do, you know, as I mentioned, we have a BOCES contract in technology alone, $1.4 million, plus the IPAs of $660,000. So we got a fair amount of money right there that we're receiving aid on, and we don't want to see that capped. They're also talking about capping the STAR, which we don't want to see. The tax levy cap law, we're entering our 7th year of the tax levy cap. I can't believe it. I retired, I didn't think I was going to have to deal with it. I retired in 2011, but I have had to deal with it a couple of times now. One reason that doesn't work is because if you think about it, the cap really, that's your starting point for next year. Whatever you raise this year, that's your new starting point for next year, your jump off point. It encourages districts to go to the maximum every year because you don't want to leave any money on the table. And we're leaving $920,000 on the table. We're doing that because that's the right thing to do. We're funding the budget, but going forward, again, the state originally proposed this tax cap and the carryover function, which doesn't work the way the state interprets the carryover function. In other words, the carryover was supposed to be, if you come in under the cap, then you were supposed to be able to carry that funding over to the next year and apply it. It doesn't work that way. State interpretation. So that's an area of concern, and the governor resists all changes to the cap. That's his baby, that's his legacy, and even things talking about adding money to the budget to deal with safety concerns and letting that be an exclusion in the cap. I don't think you'll even see something like that. It's just it's very difficult to get any changes in the tax cap law. Lack of meaningful mandate relief, that's always a concern, has been for years. Not all mandates are bad, but it would be nice if the state would fund them to the level that they should. Loss of local control to federal and state governments, and possible loss of federal funds if you've been following the news. Also the change, as was mentioned earlier, the change in the federal tax law for 2018, where the some of the state and local taxes are not going to be able to be deducted at 100% on your tax return. There's going to be a cap or a limit on what you can actually deduct. That's a concern going forward, because we want to still make sure that, you know, the community is supporting the budget, and we want to keep our tax rate and increases as low as possible, which I believe we are doing this year.
That's another area where there's work being done up in Albany, and we just need to closely monitor it. It's too soon to know how it's going to turn out. But there really is this concerted effort going on to try to figure out whether or not there's a mechanism to allow school districts to collect charitable contributions in lieu of potentially property taxes, in which case it would enable individuals who itemize to get deductions on their federal tax return. Far from definitive, and, but there's enough. I think Amy Pollin's very involved in it, as I'm sure David Buckwall is involved, and a number of our delegation. They're trying to think it through, and then it's still a long ways from, I think, being voted on, but we just have to really monitor it closely, because something like that could really help our community.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting go around what they're trying to do, make it charitable deductions, and you're right. The districts, Westchester, Long Island, you know, the Lower Hudson Valley, are the districts that are going to be impacted by this mostly, right. I believe so. The budget will be posted on the website. It says March 9th. Let's see, today's the 6th.
Yes, it will be.
So yeah, it'll be on the 9th. I was hoping it wasn't March 7th, because
No.
all right.
We already have no school tomorrow, March 7th.
Right. And this is our budget development process again. Just as a quick review, we do have a couple of budget hearings coming up where the community can provide input. We encourage the community to do that. We will provide additional information from some of the areas, buildings and grounds, technology, some of the areas that haven't presented yet. I'll get you some additional information on the special education that came up. The budget has to be adopted on the 24th. The May 8th hearing is interesting. The budget cannot be changed at that point, but you still have to hold the hearing. According to the state, we have to file our property tax report card the day after the board adopts the budget, and we do have the vote on May 15th. And thank you.
Well, thank you
Thank you,
very
Jim.
much. And thank you, Jen.
I'm going to do a pulse check of the people in the audience. They still look really awake and alive. So, Jim, thank you very much for that. And as Jim said, we'll have some more presentations at our March 20th meeting. And then I believe by the 27th, we start to talk about revenue, right?
Yes.
Right, so we'll look forward to that and just continuing to keep our public informed. And thank you to this group who came here to show your support of our schools tonight and for creating this budget.
And I would be
Appreciate it.
remiss if I didn't thank Susan. She has spent hours and hours and hours on this. And also Mary Jones, my assistant in the office, has spent hours and hours on this. So it's been a real group effort. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
I think we should tell the community, frankly, that, you know, every year, sometimes we hear from time to time, I didn't know, or I didn't have the information, or no one tells me anything. Well, please, there really is an abundance of information available for you. It's available here, it's available online at the district website. It's going to be available in mailings you're going to get. The board in the last number of years has taken great pains to be as communicative as possible and as transparent as possible in the whole budget process. So it is easy for any community member to fully avail themselves of the information and become an informed voter, which is all the board wants. So please take advantage of the opportunity and the information that is out there for you.
Should we take a little recess?
Yes,
We'll
we
take
let
just a
them go.
2-minute recess. Thank you. You're more than welcome to stay as always, but we understand if
Thank
you want to
you.
get out before the snow. Appreciate
Thanks,
all your
everyone.
support. Sleep in. Welcome back,
Lisa.
everybody. And we are joined by Lisa Pellegrino, our chair of math, and we are at 9.1. We're going to talk about the Math Pathways program.
You're turning it right over to me?
Turning it over to Tim.
Good, and before we start, I have a little announcement that Lisa knows I'm going to make, because I warned her, is that Lisa, we just found out this week, she was given an award from the National Center for Women in Information Technology for aspirations in computing education.
What does that mean? It sounds good. What does it mean?
Sounds good. So,
We'll
yeah,
take
what
a
is it
female
exactly?
technology guru.
So the organization is dedicated to inspiring and encouraging women in the field of computer science. So if anybody has studied the trends in computer science, it's sad. In the 80s there was a little bit of a spike where you saw, upwards of like 30% female in computer science, and that number is now down to around 18% of computer science majors are female. So we are striving to encourage more and more of our females to explore the field and how it might relate to them.
Congratulations.
Great work.
Wow.
And she also encouraged some students to apply for an award, and I'll write about it in the next packet. We just got that information, so you'll hear about some girls that will get an award as well.
3 winners and 11 honorable mentions. So altogether, 14 fabulous young women that are being recognized for their contributions to computer science.
That's great.
Really
So
proud. It was,
high school students.
yeah, it was a big effort, to think about making sure we're including women in our efforts. Really terrific.
And before you begin, I just wanted to thank you for going to the colleges and seeing what their needs were for our students, just to align.
Got more trips coming up. It's been absolutely eye-opening. And I will tell you that, I think I've said this to everybody that I've talked about this trip, but the folks at Binghamton were absolutely fabulous and could not, they have an amazing program there. Everyone was lovely, and they just could not have been nicer and put together a nicer program for us when we were there. So they gave us access to professors, they gave us access to students, access to labs. It was really tremendous.
That's great.
So it was great.
Any of our students are
We saw some of our former students there in classes doing their things.
Does they look at you funny and say, what are you doing?
So actually, one of them was Christopher Lewick's former students, and so when Mr. Lewick walked into the room, he turned.
That's great.
What's going on?
Was it part of, I know you were going around to colleges to collect this information, but was it part of a program with other high schools?
Nope,
Or is it
this is all by our
you
house.
guys?
So our goal from the math department is really to start thinking about post, graduation and what colleges are expecting from students, what education looks like, specifically in the fields of mathematics and engineering. So it's been the
It's so important.
start of our journey.
It's so important what you're doing. Congratulations.
It's a
It
great
really
idea.
is.
Great idea.
And I summarized her trip to Binghamton, and she has more trips planned with Dr. Taylor and also bringing math teachers as well. So maybe after they complete their visit and summarize it, we'll bring both Andrew and Lisa back and
Love to
the
hear
math
about
teachers
that.
and talk about
Really would.
sort of a summation of their findings. But
Really
the
would
Binghamton
love to.
visit was really interesting, and I went to the math department meeting where we discussed it. It's also to let our community know, this is Binghamton's first year as being a Tier 1 school.
Correct.
So they just went from Tier 2 to Tier 1 this
That's
year.
funny. I would have thought they were a tier one
Yeah, me
school.
too.
at one
I'm
time.
actually
Very
surprised.
close, but it's officially their first year.
But it's based on
University.
competitiveness,
Yeah.
that's why. It's
Yeah.
not
On that
so
very
much-
good
It's
Yeah.
shrunk a little bit, and so there was a handful of
I
schools
still
that went
believe
from
in
tier
90
2
or
to
both
tier
together.
1, and then a good number actually that went from tier 2 to tier 3. But Binghamton, with the tremendous work they've been doing.
Only a handful of schools that went up recently.
And if anybody's watching and is interested, the computer science department there is very proud that they have a very high average starting salary of around $91,000.
Wow.
For anybody with kids that you're looking for a good job, I'll just hype that even more.
Promoting those professions, she
I am.
does this all the time.
All the time.
And you met one of her students,
mine was bad.
She visited the
Yes,
TA, computer
Jennifer
science
Cotter,
TA.
yeah.
So she visited on one of our visits of student
Yeah.
years. So let's get into this discussion.
Yeah.
It's a little sidetrack, thanks Lisa, but we'll bring you back and talk more about that visit. So Lisa and I, for over 3 years now, have been studying particularly the Accelerated Math Pathways program, and it was really based on some data and some trends we were noticing, which included the fact that students in our accelerated program, when they went from the middle school to high school, we saw a big decrease in their performance and their achievement. And as well as those students, we found that a high percentage of students were not taking 4 years of mathematics. So that data, which seemed very consistent with longitudinal data I looked at when I was math chair, started to really trouble us, and we wanted to fix that systemically. We wanted to look at the structure that might be causing that and see if we can fix that. And that led to us making some changes to the pathway program, which was based on research and which was based on our data and information. We also conducted focus groups with parents and students to help inform our changes as well. And that led to the changes, with the one goal being that we want to help increase the probability of more students taking more math. And that's really our fundamental goals. We want more students taking more math at high levels. So with that, I invited Lisa to come and present, and Kim is here as well to support her with those changes to sort of summarize where we are now in our first year in implementation. So we're a little more than halfway through this first cohort going into the new pathways, and Lisa's just going to summarize what she's seeing and where we're headed. So let me turn it over to Lisa. So thanks for joining us.
So given the budget presentation, since we were in such a math mood, I was going to start with a nice compound interest problem for everybody, but then Chris Walsh said that he thought that might not go over well. So I want to start by just talking to you about what Tim just mentioned, which is our goal for this math acceleration change, which is really for more students to be exposed to more math and at higher levels. And so contained within that goal, we have what we call our 3 C's, which is we're also looking to provide students with more choice in their instruction, more challenge in both instruction and assessment, and change perceptions about mathematics. So I know that we've had a lot of talk from K-12 about growth versus fixed mindset, and so that's something that we're very conscious of in the math world and something that we're looking to change. Our focus has been grounded in something called rich tasks, which I will describe in a moment in more detail. But I think what I want to make sure everybody understands both here and at home is, as Tim said, we've been looking at this for a long time, for a couple of years. And what we didn't want to do was make the change too quickly before we felt like we were prepared for the change in instruction that would need to be commensurate with such a change in the acceleration. So what we did was really took a look at our instruction first, and changed that, and then felt like we were ready to make this kind of leap into this new acceleration model. And so that change in instruction is grounded in our rich tasks. So this we've seen before. Just for a reminder for both folks here and at home, this is our revised pathways. So the highlights from this are the fact that there are 2 pathways. The first one occurs at the end of 7th grade, and then the second one occurs at the end of 9th grade. So our first cohort this year is our students in Math 7, so they are heterogeneously mixed. There is no separation of students. They experienced rich assignments and rich tasks starting in 6th grade. It's now being continued this year, more tiered assignments. And then the first pathway, the culmination or the end goal for that first pathway is really the study of BC Calculus, which is the study of 2 semesters of college level calculus. The second pathway, the one at the end of 9th grade, the goal for that would be students studying calculus either at an AP Calculus AB level or a non-AP Calculus. So that kind of gives you a big overview of our pathways. So now on to rich tasks. So the term rich task is not specific to Byram Hills. These descriptions or the characteristics of rich tasks are something we've come up with, but I do want to mention that rich tasks, their importance and their success in the classroom is evidence-based. So folks that have followed Jo Bowler and her research, there's a tremendous amount of research she has over the past 5 or 6 years that have supported the benefits of rich tasks in the classroom, not just in terms of students' growth versus fixed mindset, but real, apples to apples test data in terms of how students perform. So what a rich task will do is it's never just one single math standard. It addresses a variety of standards within one problem. It gives access to all students, so it's what we call this low floor, high ceiling. So it has entry for everybody, but students can take it a number of different places. And then I think probably Tim and I's favorite part of it is this term mathematical residue, which almost has a feel to it. You feel like, oh, I don't like that. But so often when we students, adults, when we learn something, we learn it, right? And then a day later we're like, okay, I forgot what that was about. But the idea of mathematical residue is it's left there, okay? So there's something that kind of becomes a part of you that you carry on throughout your mathematical journey. And then the last piece encourages discussion, because that's really something that we're looking to change in all of our classrooms. And I think anyone that's walked through the halls of HCC, the biggest thing that you will notice in the past couple of years is just the amount of rich discussion that's going on in the classroom. So, best thing to do for a rich test is to show you one. This is not a test. You don't have to write anything down. I'm going to talk about this at a high level. If you would like to, talk about it more in depth, you can find me in my office with a cup of coffee, and we'll sit and talk about it more in depth. So, I'm not going to read the problem for you. What I want to highlight about the problem is something that Jo Bowler or our consultant Ann Burgunder might say is a noticing about it. So something you might notice about the first part of this problem is there's no equations. It's just a picture and a description. We've got some acrobats and some grandmas. This is not meant as a pro or con of either of those groups of people, just folks that are in the picture. And you'll also notice, perhaps, that there is no question, at least no question in this first piece, okay, which is something that is characteristic of a rich task. So you might avoid the question or hold off on the question at first and give students an opportunity just to think about what's going on. Then we have the second part of the rich task. So again, we see no question. We see the introduction of this ferocious looking dog, Ivan, with an appropriately ferocious name. Now it's him versus the grandmas. And again, no equation.
And one acrobat.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the grandmas and an acrobat. I mean, I'm sorry to have left off the acrobat. And then our third piece here. So again, no equations, just a description of the situation here. Now, the grandmas and Ivan have teamed up, and they're going against the acrobats. And then finally, we have a question, okay, which is who will win this round, and explain your reasoning. So what you might have at this point, even if you don't have any formal math to support, is you might have an instinct, right? I feel like one side is going to win. I think if you kind of have that instinct with any of these types of problems, that's how you know it might be a rich task, okay? That's what makes it a low floor, high ceiling task, right? Because even if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do any math, right? You might have something that you could offer into that problem, right? Some sort of insight or gut feel about it. And so what you'll see over the next couple of slides are varying levels that students took this same task. Okay? The other thing I would say about rich task, in the same way that I might say something about like rich cookies, right? So maybe Peggy and I both have the same ingredients for cookies, right? And she might make cookies and they taste really rich, right? And I might make cookies and they don't taste so great. But we made the same ingredients, right? And so a lot of times Tim and I would get questions from other schools saying, can you tell me your rich tasks? Like, can you just like send me a book of your rich tasks? And the thing about a rich task, what makes it rich, is not the task itself. It really is how you see it develop in the classroom, which I think anyone, any of our principals that have been, or Tim or Jen that have been into these classrooms, it's really how it unfolds and how the teacher facilitates it that makes it rich. So you might look at something, and our teachers sometimes will have the same initial reaction, which is, I'm not sure if this is so rich. And then when they see it come out in the classroom and they see the discussion that comes from it, that's where the richness develops. And that's what our teachers are seeing. So there's some work that you'll see here from the students that surprised teachers that have taught this content for a very long time. Okay? So this is one group's response here. And so what you'll notice in all of these four groups' responses is everyone came to the same answer. So a lot of times people have this idea of math as, there's a right answer. And that can be true a lot of times. But I think what's nice about math is you can have what this is a Byram Tales term actually, our consultants stole it from us. So if you ever see it used, we actually came up with it first, which is open beginning problems. So a lot of times people will say, oh, open-ended, right? That's kind of a colloquialism. But in math, really I think what's more apropos is it's open beginning. So you might all come to the same answer, but have very different avenues in getting there. So this group had a couple of overarching ideas that came from this, least common multiple, equality, order of operations, that came out in this problem. This second group had a little bit more come out. This idea of a unit rate, okay, was introduced in their work. And then they started with this idea of variables, right? So anyone that studied algebra, that's kind of one of your underpinnings of algebra is like, the famous let statement, let x equal something, right? So they have this idea of using a variable. We have this third group, also used unit rate. A different take on it that they had was not only looking at it as an equality, but also an inequality. So you see on the bottom part of their work there, they have a greater than symbol. So that was something new that group had introduced. And then this last group used a technique called substitution. Now, the thing I want to tell you is, so back in the day, maybe, when we were in school, you might have come to class one day and they were saying, today we are learning how to use substitution to solve systems of equations, right? And you're like, okay, that's the goal for today. And then they gave us some equations. That never happened here, okay? The students were never told. They were never even exposed to the word substitution. They just did it. Right? That was just where they went with the problem. okay? And then the teacher, in facilitating this discussion, would at some point say, Group 4, I noticed you did something interesting. Can you tell us about that? And, oh, by the way, did you know in math we have a word for that? We call that substitution, okay? And so it would come out much more organically, which is exciting, I think, for us and for the kids as well. Okay, so now we delve into, oh, sure.
I just want to allow, if you have
Oh,
questions,
sorry,
or
yes.
any time to jump in.
Please jump in.
I was sort of giving an overview of the instructional focus.
Yes.
One observation I have is it seems like it would take really skilled teachers who are aware of what the goals are with these problems and how to facilitate
Yes.
that discussion.
Yes,
And
and I think our teachers, like I said, they've been teaching this content a long time, but I will tell you that every single one of them has said, I feel like a brand new teacher, because you're really looking at it with such a fresh perspective.
And that's been a focus of the professional development
Yes.
with our consultant.
Yeah.
Now, the students coming in, this is 7th grade?
It's 7th grade.
So are they?
Though that problem actually I think was,
Eighth grade.
there was an 8th grade
Eighth grade,
one, but
okay.
the cohort is 7th grade.
So is there like a foundation that they need to be able to approach these problems this way, or are
So-
they pretty much open-minded to this?
I think that as we've made more and more changes from the Common Core, they've been getting more and more exposed, even at the K-5 levels, to this kind of, the whole philosophy of the Common Core is like show multiple approaches, show me different ways. You might use a tape diagram, an equation, and so I think they've gotten more used to that. And then 6-8, the teachers actually, it's pretty cool. In the beginning of the school year, they all gave the same task to grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. So all the kids were starting out the year with rich tasks, and you can see kind of the different ways they took it with 6th grade versus 7th grade versus 8th grade. And so each year they kind of plan like, okay, this year, how do we want to start the year? What rich tasks do we want to give? And then they ground their work throughout the year in the rich tasks. So the kids have gotten more and more used to
I
it.
haven't taken a math course in 46 years.
Come on down.
But
You should come
this,
down.
what you just showed here was something so different and almost remarkable. And I could see how something like this could actually work to defray some people's math panic and the fear of math. And it's a whole
Yes.
different way of teaching the subject matter that it's a healthy way to teach math.
Yes, and you'll see kind of woven through this is that idea of a healthy challenge, of students being challenged, but in a healthy way that's taking out that fear and that
I was
power.
ready for BC.
Do you want to come tomorrow? We have.
So
I don't want to be
We can
embarrassed.
give you one-on-one instruction.
So it sounds like these are done in groups, these kind of.
So what you would notice absolutely is a lot more group work going on.
Is it harder to keep track of the students that maybe aren't contributing to that group because maybe they're not getting concept?
So our teachers, part of the work that they've done with the consultant, and our consultant has just this fabulous way of how she just kind of takes notes and goes around and writes down things that people say and like the right thing at the right time. Have you considered this? Have you thought about that? So the teachers have now, had that become ingrained in them. I will tell you they're extraordinarily thoughtful in how they group students.
Okay.
So, maybe a few years back, they might just say, okay, I'll put these 4 here, these 4. I actually co-taught with 2 of our 8th grade teachers today, and probably a good third to a half of our planning time was about how are we going to group students, because we want to make sure that we're addressing that, and we don't want students where one person is taking over the group, right, and doing the work. We also don't want a situation where a particular group might feel like they're floundering. So really finding that right balance, and that was a lot of work into that planning.
The multiple pathways, obviously,
Yeah.
it's a very good thing, and it gives people more choice and more flexibility
Yes.
to move up or down, for that matter, depending
Right.
on what makes sense for them. The one thing when we instituted it that was, if you had to identify a risk, it was
Yeah.
that 7th grade year where no longer is there separation, so now there's tiered assignments, and
Correct.
tiered assignments, the one complexity is that you're still in the same classroom, and there could be
Absolutely.
behavioral issues, and there could be lots of
Absolutely.
things going on. Is it too soon to know whether it's working or not, or do you have enough evidence at this point to say, yep, it works, or no, maybe it doesn't? Or...
Yeah. So I don't think we'll ever have enough. Well, for me, I love evidence. I love data. So do I ever have enough data? I don't know that I have ever enough data. I will tell you what we have so far is some survey data that I'll share, and we also have anecdotal data. If you're looking at the anecdotal data from the teachers, they're absolutely just blown away. They're blown away by where kids in the higher end are taking problems that they have never taken those problems before, even when it was a separated out advanced course, a Math 7-8 course. They're amazed at what kids across the whole spectrum are able to do. And I will tell you, just in terms of their delight in teaching it, I think they just find they're getting so much more out of all of the students. So anecdotally, so far, I feel like we've definitely seen it be a positive. And then based off of the performance of students observationally in class and on assessments, they really feel like each student is appropriately challenged for their own needs.
This is like what we saw when we went to the high school, right? When you and I were
Exactly.
in the math class that you took us to, Chris. It was fascinating. These kids were in little groups.
Yep.
It was so different from
Very different.
the lecture math
Very
class that I
different,
grew
yes.
up in. And they were just talking, and the teacher was kind of guiding, I would say
Yes.
guiding the
As a
discussion.
facilitator, right.
It wasn't, there was
Right.
no, that's right or that's not right. She never said whether the answer was right or wrong. She just asked them to defend it, and then she asked the other kids, what do you think about it? It was fascinating that.
Yes, and I will
The
tell you
thought
one of the big
process.
things that came out from our visit recently to Binghamton that kids had mentioned when we asked, well, what would you have wanted from a high school experience, was exactly that. They said, we are asked all of the time to defend our work, defend it to professors, defend it to other students, and we wish we had had more experience doing that in high school. And these were not kids necessarily from Byram, these were just
So
kind of
how
the
do you
population.
grade children like that? I mean, how do you assess them? Because if you're not saying,
So-
okay, that's the right answer and this is the wrong answer, how do you grade them?
So it depends on the nature of the assessment, right? So if you look at like the first bullet here, if you're talking about more of what might be a traditional assessment, there's different versions. And I will say, the versioning in terms of version 1, 2, or 3 is happening in the middle school. But some folks that might have me right now could speak to experience that in the high school, there's versioning happening as well. We have a lot of courses with standards-based grading, and they're using standards-based grading to achieve that. So from a middle school standpoint, what you see are the different versions of assessments. So that's one way to address it. The second piece there on the tasks, and I'll talk more in the next slide about the rubric for the tasks. But the tasks, the students are presenting in groups to the teacher. So a lot of that assessment actually happens on the fly through the questions that the teachers ask the kids, which is pretty cool. And then we have just in-class observations of students that the teachers have, and then the student self-assessment, which we also feel is really important, because I think it's good for students to be able to know who they are as a learner, where they are as a learner, and where they want to go as a learner. So if you take a look at the rubric, there's a couple of important pieces about this rubric. The first is it's a continuum. Okay, so it's not that a student is here and they stay here, right? So we would anticipate, or we would expect students to be at what we call a level 4 out of 4 on this continuum by the end of the year, right? Which is meeting grade standards. So if you are out of 4, you are meeting your 7th grade level standards. But you might not start out as a 4, and that's fine, right? Especially with the level of rigor of these tasks, you might have started out as a 3 or a 2 and moved towards a 4 by the end of the year. Or you might have been someone that started out as a 3 or a 4, and now you're a 5, right? And so now you're demonstrating, okay, I'm ready to do that advanced work, right? The work for going into the advanced algebra, because now I'm not only meeting the grade level standards, but I'm exceeding the grade level standards, and that's what we would expect. To kind of make a corollary to standards-based grading and the stuff that you're seeing in the high school, that would be like a level 5 in the high school, right, in a standards-based grading versus a level 4 versus a level 3. So you see it kind of manifest in different ways, not just in the middle school. So that's our task, and this, like I said, this all occurs for the rich tasks on the fly with students. So the students come with their presentations, and the teachers are asking them questions on the fly.
Can I also add that they have pre-observations with the students, then they give them feedback during the observation of that rich task, and then they meet with them afterwards, then say, here were your goals, and this is where we think you landed. This is your goal for the next time. They did 3 last year, and they're going to do a 4th bridge test this year, they hope. So there'll be 4 times those students, 1 per quarter, that they'll be going through that lengthy process.
And I think that's something that we, meaning, Kim, myself, and the teachers, and Tim, I think we all felt that communication was really important. So we felt it was important for the teachers to be in constant communication and discussion with the kids as well as the parents, and just be very open and transparent about the whole process.
I feel that level of self-awareness lowers their anxiety about it.
Absolutely.
That's not a mystery about where they stand.
What about for parents, though? How's that?
How the parents reacting to it.
I don't know how
But it's such a change.
I think it's a change.
Yeah, it's a change.
So far, the overwhelming feedback that we've got from parents is very positive. I think they're loving the work that their kids are doing in the classroom. I think they're also loving that their kids are engaged and they're interested. And they're coming home being exposed to more difficult math than they would have before. And the parents like that.
And we had a principal's coffee that Kim had added scheduled. It was scheduled for last Friday, is that right? That got canceled because of the weather?
Yeah.
So we rescheduled it, so we'll...
So tomorrow?
The team.
I know. So we'll do another one just because we want to keep
Is
open
it rescheduled
communication.
already? Or
It's rescheduled for Friday.
We're going to send out an
Thursday.
email that says March 15th.
March 15th? Same
We'll
time?
send it out. Yeah.
No.
Noon. It's going to be at
it's
noon. A little bit sooner. It'll be a lunch.
There's a coffee, then a tea, now a lunch.
Could we go back to the pathway slide?
Sure.
I apologize.
Yeah.
When do the students who are doing the second pathway
Yeah.
experience geometry, algebra 2, and trig, since those are all needed for the ACTs?
Right,
and
it's a
SATs?
great question. So Tim and I, based on some feedback that we heard from parents, so I'll tell you the one piece, so you're asking about parent feedback, the one piece of critical feedback that we've had, it was around the naming of the courses in that green pathway, right? So we originally kind of went with a very traditional, like algebra 2 geometry, trigonometry, pre-calculus naming, and that posed some difficulties. And so on reflection, we had thought, well, let's think about maybe calling it pre-calculus 1 and pre-calculus 2. And the nature of pre-calculus is really, it's interesting if you ever go to different schools. There's no one pre-calculus curriculum. It's probably the most diverse one you would see across any school from K-12 mathematics. So pre-calculus really encompasses a lot of different topics. For us, what we felt was it's a course that is preparing you to take calculus. So that course would include geometry, it include the important elements of geometry for 2 things. One would be for calculus, and the other would be what students would need for standardized testing for both the SAT and the ACT. So that's going to be at the forefront of our mind as we're crafting that course. Same thing for trigonometry. So trigonometry is especially fundamental for calculus, but also there's elements that are needed for the SAT and the ACT. So again, knowing when our population is taking those tests will also come into play in how we develop those courses. And then there'll be the advanced elements that will really prepare students for calculus. So we are definitely going to be thinking about that. The names are still in flux. I will tell you our plan is to meet with Mike McGrath and a college advisor after April 30th, so in some downtime for the colleges, and vet this out with them and get their thoughts in terms of what they think would be a name, how would they feel in terms of these names, would they go one way or the other, and make an informed decision. But I will tell you, those topics are definitely at the forefront of our mind in terms of both preparation for college, preparation for calculus, and preparation for those standardized tests that we know are very important for our kids.
I think that's probably where you're going to win the confidence of the parents.
Yes.
That's ultimately, I think, what the parents are concerned.
Right.
Is,
And
are they
you
going to
should
do
be,
okay on the
right?
test?
Right. You want to make sure, that the kids are
Right.
getting what they need to.
I mean, if they do okay on the tests, how they get there is,
Right.
I'm okay with it.
Right.
As long as they get there.
I would say there's kind of 2 important elements from that is like where the kids end up their senior year in terms of the math and what they're exposed to, and were they, in that journey, were they adequately prepared for what they needed to in order to get there?
Yeah, if they,
Right,
if
did
they
they have
can
enough of
enjoy the
that
process.
time frame to take standardized tests multiple times?
Yeah.
Correct.
Like, did they get
so
enough of a
absolutely, right,
starting
right.
early,
And
right?
so we know, I think we'll sit down with guidance more and get, if we can get some quantitative data, I'll tell you qualitatively, I think we have a good feel for when the kids are taking the tests, and so we're going to use that to help us form what topics will come when in that 2-year curriculum. curriculum.
Lisa, I want to get us back to.
Oh, sure.
Just keeping an eye on.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
So just to give you an overview of what we are seeing so far in the classroom. So far we have, depending on the class and the time of year, between 35 and 45% of students taking that version 3, which again would be our above grade level standards. About 1/5 of our student population right now is scoring 93 or higher. So our anticipation for the first pathway is between 1/5 and 1/4 of students would be taking advantage of the first pathway. That would ultimately lead them to BC Calculus. So they would be moving into our Advanced Algebra 1 course in 8th grade. We would anticipate between 25 and 35% taking advantage of that second opportunity for acceleration. And so what we would see this meaning is likely an increase in the number or percentage of students that are getting exposed to high-level math, right? So right now, we have a couple of students every year that are taking summer courses, and that's the only way for them to really do an advancement. But this would open the door for not only those kids, but I think what we're hearing right now from the high school teachers, specifically, sophomore year when students, tend to mature a little bit, is I really could probably pick out a couple more students that, if given the opportunity, could take advantage of an opportunity like this. So I think, we'll be able to catch the right students and more students with this opportunity. So that's our more math. So we would say, I think our students are getting exposed to more math. I think we are giving more challenge to students, and this is challenge at all ends of the spectrum. Okay, so our goal is really for each student to be appropriately challenged, whether that's someone that's just kind of getting the feel of the math and trying it out from a rudimentary level, to someone that's, oh, I got that and now I can take it to this next level. Okay, so we really wanted to make sure, especially with that switch to a heterogeneous classroom, that we had the same feel of someone being in a homogeneous classroom being able to receive that challenge. So we have leveled content, both in terms of the instruction and the assessment. We have students across the spectrum being exposed to content in depth that they would not have previously been exposed to. So that students that would not have been accelerated, but they're touching topics that they would not have touched before, to students that maybe perhaps would have been accelerated by now, but they're getting a depth and they're getting a reach of content that they would not have gotten in the past vis-a-vis our rich tasks. So in terms of what we're seeing, so again, somewhat anecdotal, but our classroom observations are supporting that idea that all students are being challenged. We have not heard from students going like, oh, I'm bored, or I don't feel like. Everyone's walking out of there saying, wow, like I really feel like that was I don't know if they might not use the term rich task. So, but I think they're at least walking out of there, they might not be able to articulate it in the same way that we would, but I think they're walking out feeling like, that they were challenged.
And successful?
And success, right. And I think part of it is redefining what success is, which goes towards our changing of mindsets, right? Because students in the past might have just defined success as getting the right answer and being the first to get it.
Yeah.
And so some of it comes from changing that mindset about that's not really what math's about. It's not about the destination, and it's not about the time. It's really about the journey, and it's okay if that journey takes longer.
And I think that is very appropriate given the current marketplace
Yes.
of how things work.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great rubric for the marketplace.
Absolutely. And even with colleges, you see the difference in how college students are assessed and working together, and the collaboration that's occurring there. So I think those are the skills that folks are looking for. And then we have a plan at the end of the year to just do kind of a comparison between this year and last year and see how kids are doing, just as kind of a quick litmus test for us and make sure that we're on the right track. In terms of the variation of challenge, it's hard to quite capture these student presentations, but if you ask anyone that's been to them, Kim and I and Tim have been to a couple, and it's really amazing to see the students presenting. But what I do want to highlight where the arrows are in this picture is just to show you that these students are all presenting within the same class period. But you'll notice that the first group is the trees problem, the second one is taxi cabs, and the third one is ice cream. So they're different tasks that take students to different levels. even within the same class period, right? So that's how we're able to reach all students and make sure that all students are challenged at a level that's appropriate for them.
Lisa, is there different content in those tasks as well, so some kids are exposed to different content?
So all of them would have grade level content, and then some of them would allow for students to go beyond grade level content. So then our next piece about more choice. So we really want students to feel empowered in the math classroom. And so we have station activities within the classroom where kids can go and make choices in terms of I want to go here, I might need more guidance, I want to go here, less guidance, or I really want to push myself and I'm going to go to this station. So we have grade level challenges, above grade level challenges. Even something as small as like worksheets or just quick tasks in the classroom are leveled. Even small assessments, so the teachers have done a couple of smaller assessments that are 5 points, as opposed to like a big, 80 or 100 point assessment that are also versions, so that if a kid just wants to kind of like dip their toe in and get a feel for what a version 3 is in a non-committal way, they can do that. And so they can do that with things like application problems or application assessments, which are one problem but allow for so many different approaches that a kid can take it in a bunch of different directions, and you really get a feel for kind of the level at which a kid is describing something. And then I think what's really important based off of our work with Ann Bergender and also the research that our teachers have done with Joe Bowler, and I know this is continuing our work from the elementary school in terms of growth versus fixed mindset. I think all of this is impossible to do if people are going to keep a fixed mindset about math. So really we are trying very hard across the district to change that perception. And so what we have here is just some preliminary survey data that we've done recently with the students, just trying to get a quick feedback and a quick pulse on their perceptions with math and if we feel like they're changing. So just some interesting points. I'm sure Tim has mentioned to you, there's like this famous piece of research that says if you both grade and put comments on an assessment, kids only pay attention to the grade. But if you only put comments, kids will pay attention to the comments. And so what we're seeing here is students focusing more on feedback as opposed to grade. So are they still getting graded? They are. But you see we have 60% of kids focusing on the comments, which is up from our students in the high school, which is around 15%. Another big push is risk-taking. We are asking teachers to be risk-takers, right? The changes they're making to their instruction is certainly risk-taking for them, and I think they're modeling that for their kids. And we want students to know that we value that. We want them to take risks in the classroom on their homework and on assessments. And so we have the majority of students in our 7th grade feeling that risk-taking is valued, which is great. A big one is this idea of speed. So I think it's a traditional view, for a lot of us when you were in school, right, it was like you had to know your times tables, you had to know them quickly. If you didn't, maybe you got slapped on the hand with a ruler, right? I mean, it was intense. And I think we're getting away from this idea that math needs to be done quickly. There was actually a very famous mathematician, a female mathematician that passed away recently, that won a Fields Medal, and she described her experiences in high school as always having felt so stupid because she was so careful and deliberate, and as she called it, slow with math. And she went on to win a Fields Medal, which for anyone watching is like the Nobel Prize, only like more exclusive because you only get it every 4 years. And so I think she helped dispel that myth that you don't have to be quick in math. And so we're seeing really, at this point, just such a small percentage of our kids feeling like they need to be quick.
But the tests are still timed, right?
So, I will tell you, in an ideal world, right, in an ideal world, we would have on-time tests. I think, and I can say from the high school as well as the middle school, you will see far fewer problems on tests now than you would have in the past, to give students more time, right? And so rather than me putting, let's say, 50 rote problems on a test, I might only put 4.
Tests are still timed.
From our state, yes,
Or
they are.
They are. The state ones are not. The ELAs are not anymore.
The state ones are.
So the state has reduced the number of questions they're asking kids now too. So I think they're trying to show, that they're responding to this. but certainly not ideal. But I think we're at least moving, I'll say, in the right direction with that. I feel like we are. And then the last bullet is interesting because I'll tell you that I think almost everybody that you talk to, maybe in our generation, will tell you you either have the math gene or you don't, right? If you don't have it, you're out of luck. And you know, all the research has shown there's no math gene, right? There really isn't. As much as people might really fight to say that there is, you know, they've mapped the whole human genome and we've yet to find it. But what was interesting is I was in an engineering class at a Tier 1 institution, right, at Binghamton. And I said, I just have a final question. Could you just raise your hand if you think you're either someone that's good at math or bad at math, and that's it? And almost every hand shot up. And I said, oh my gosh, this is what people believe, right? And I said, have you ever felt stupid in math? And everybody's hand shot up. So we're really working to try and get away from that notion of if you're good, you're good, and if you're not, that's too bad, because it's just not true. Okay? And so what we're seeing is, and I think that's a big difference between middle school and high school, right, is you have 70% in the high school saying, yeah, you're either good or bad at math, and only 30% in the middle school. I would love that to be 0, but I think, again, we're moving in the right direction, or hopefully, moving in the right direction.
It starts very young, too.
You used to be asked that for years. Yeah, exactly.
So I will tell you the scariest piece of research I read from Joe Bowler is that it all occurs between ages 3 and 5, and I read this during the time that my son was going from 3 to 5, and I said, oh my gosh, I still have time, he's still 5,
grade when she started
there is hope. But that's, I mean, I will tell you that's where that fixed mindset gets reinforced the most, is ages 3 to 5.
Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful, it's powerful. And so, back to our,
Lisa,
we're kind of
that
mission.
was one of the best
Yeah, it was
presentations.
amazing.
Well,
Thank you.
So informative to
Thank
me.
you.
It's a whole
Great.
window of things I had no idea about. Really?
Math is so exciting.
Yeah.
It is the most
It
exciting.
is. I mean,
Lisa, I love what you were talking about. Tim and I were talking about it today, some of Carol Dweck's work, and this level of optimization, right? At an optimal level. I mean, let's consider Chris the marathon runner, right? They say that, I've never gotten to this in my life, but they say that you hit a certain point running and you're hitting a flow and you're at your optimal point. And what her work is showing is that the optimal point is not about achievement. It's not about getting this right. It's about actually having strategy. And so kids who can develop that thinking that it's the strategy that's important and not a right or wrong answer are going to have flow and get into that optimal level. And it's like speaks to everything that you're talking about today.
And that's absolutely what we heard. I asked professors, I asked engineering advisors, I asked TAs at Binghamton, what do you think makes you successful in engineering? Is there anything you could tease out? Test scores? Nope. SAT scores? Nope. GPAs from high school? Nope. But that was the one thing. They said if you could get at a student that has strategies to be persistent, that's really what will tell you if they're going to be successful.
So what I think,
which is powerful.
Yeah, at least I want to thank you, and what I hope the community and the board understands is that we're being really careful along the way to make adjustments in this. So we really want this to work because Lisa and I really believe this is right for our kids. And so we're putting the effort into training teachers to make sure the instruction is there, really thinking about the curriculum, and then assessing the student experience, both in terms of their achievement as well as their perception and attitudes, which we think are both important. So we keep making adjustments. We'll continue to look at end-of-year data. We'll see what kids seem to be going into that advanced algebra at the end, and we're willing to make adjustments along the way if we feel it's not quite working, but we do feel we're on the right pathway, and our initial assessment of it seems to be showing that. We're very excited about it.
wow, I think it's great.
So we're excited. So Lisa, thank you for your time. and
Thank you.
thanks
It was a
to the
great
board.
presentation, Tim. Thanks to.
It really was. Well done.
Thank you.
Appreciate and
You'll be here tomorrow morning at 7:30 for a consult?
and Chris, thank you too for coming.
Nobody will be here tomorrow at 7:30.
I'm aware of that.
Everybody loves dogs and grandmas. Bottom line.
I keep forgetting the acrobats. And
The acrobats are all right.
we
They
did like a
lost.
disclaimer on the bottom of this video. no acrobats
I
were
wish you
forgotten
took
during
a
the
picture
board
of the
meeting.
parents took it, because they came to it
Yes.
from so many different
Yes,
perspectives.
yeah,
It
it
was
was wild.
interesting.
And we had the 6th grade parent night with our teachers from the 6th grade, and even just the things the parents came with were things I would have never thought of. That I, even having given these problems to various sections of students, never came out. I mean, it was
So
amazing.
the high school math teachers, are they being trained then in this? I mean, some of them
We
I
have
know already
a
do
lot
it.
going on at the high
Right.
school right now. So we have our 9th and 10th grade teachers now working with the consultant in preparation for
For these kids coming up.
for the students coming up, and then we have our on the other end our 11th and 12th grade teachers. Working with some folks from the University of Michigan over this, they will be giving up their spring break to be examining place-based and problem-based learning and experiential learning that they can bring back to the classroom. So we have a lot of things going on.
Very exciting. Thank you.
And more college visits planned. So
teachers,
we'll be
so
going to
really
Olin and
busy.
MIT in April, hopefully Carnegie Mellon next year. So
Wow.
a lot
Nice
of
work,
burners on
thank
in the
you.
math department.
But it's great, Lisa, you're doing a great job with it. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for joining
Well
us.
deserving of that award too.
Yeah,
Kids are more
congratulations.
That was exciting for them. I was excited they were able to be recognized,
It's great, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Lisa.
you.
Lisa, do you want to
Let you
stay
go.
for the second read of
You
the
ready?
policy, or do you guys? Thanks, Chris and Kim.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Good night, Ms.
Stay
Enjoy the
warm.
summer.
Stay safe and warm.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Scott will be right back, but I think it's okay if we plow ahead, right?
That's right.
Okay, so that brings us to item 11, which is unfinished business. And this was policy 7500, which was naming facilities, funds, and events. And in light of the recent various activity around this policy in areas such as the Hall of Fame requests, naming, donations from organizations, naming for facilities, for example, the theater. In lieu of that, we are going to have the naming policy, review that policy again. And we just want to make sure that whatever we decide is big picture, that we're being consistent and repeatable and very clear in how we're going to approach this policy. So with the board's agreement, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be having the policy committee review it, and then we can talk about it again in a public meeting later on.
Yeah,
Okay?
good idea.
Okay. All right, and then that brings us to 11.2. Can I have a motion to adopt as a second read policy 5332, school volunteers, interns, student, teacher, and policy 5405, student wellness?
So moved.
Second, okay. There was no changes, there was one change, a minor change, which was a cross-reference of allergies, food allergies.
Yeah,
right?
you're on the wellness policy, is that right?
That's right, the other one did
Yeah,
not
there's
have
two policies.
changes.
So the wellness policy, we made a reference to the one with allergies, and that was,
That was it, and
I think it was, I forget what the policy number was on there. It was policy
50
5420 was
Yeah.
added to it.
okay, and no other changes. Does
No other
anybody
changes.
have any other input, or, no? Okay, Scott, we did a motion to adopt as a second read. Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you all very much, policy committee. Okay, brings us to new business. Westchester Putnam
So,
School.
Robin, can I just back up?
Oh,
Did we do
sure.
both policies? You
Yes.
just- we
I did
at the
both,
same
I did
time?
both, yeah.
Okay.
4532.
I lumped them together. Okay. So the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association had sent around a resolution to all the schools in regard to safety, with their wording in it, with the suggestion that schools adopt it. Scott and I talked a little bit about it this morning, and instead of just taking the policy that they gave us, because it doesn't really, it's not very reflective of our school district, the way it's worded and some of the stuff in there, if maybe a couple of us could go back and make it Byram Hills, and then we could take it back in a public meeting and adopt, if we're all in agreement, adopt something that speaks to what we want to say as far as safety. Is that okay?
Yep.
Makes sense.
All right, and that brings us to staff reports. Madam Superintendent?
And to me, thank you. Just briefly, first I want to talk about a meeting that I had with the school community about safety and emergency planning. That was at Crittenden on February 26th. And we had Peggy McInerney there, Officer Anthony Sabatella, Chief Simonson, and Tim Kaltenecker was with us, Gina Cunningham and Mary Beth Krupe, who were all presenting. And what we realized, there were two really strong takeaways from that meeting. The first is that there was not quite enough time to have a good question and answer session, and we care very much about what the parents are thinking in our community. And to that end, we are going to have at the next 4 principals' coffees, and we've actually created 2 coffees to be able to do this, continue that safety discussion where I will look at parent recommendations, suggestions, and questions and start to address them with parents. It's really important that we listen to what our public is thinking and seeing, and also that we are responding for the safest community that we can. I started the presentation by imparting the steps that we're currently taking and the steps that we've taken over the past 5 years in improving security in this district. And those are efforts from having the New York Center for School Safety here to do a review, having our police come with us for our lockdown drills in every building for vulnerability assessments, having active shooter drills in the high school at night, practiced by our police department. These are all really important steps, but now we also need to ask ourselves, what else can we do? So the board and I have been having discussions about that, and we're continuing to have important discussions with the board, with our faculty and staff, with parents, and with the town. And we always have to have our eyes open to everything that we can possibly do to protect our students as best we can as we educate them. So I was very happy with the parent turnout and the commitment in this community. I wasn't surprised, but I was very happy. And then I have my superintendent's report, a couple of communications. First of all, I received a really nice email from Timothy Kramer at New York State School Boards Association, who wrote me an email and said, please let me extend my congratulations to Alexandra Remnitz on being selected as a finalist for the Neuroscience Research Prize, awarded by the American Academy of Neurology and Child Neurology Society. And he said being one of only 4 students across the country chosen as a finalist is amazing. So for him to reach out, and I will pass that information on to Alexandra. I just received that. It's pretty amazing. The next is our Science Olympiad, hosted 47 teams here for the Hudson Valley Regional Competition. Our Byram Hills A team medaled in 13 events, and B team medaled in 5 events. Now they're qualified for state competition in March at Lemoyne College. I want to thank the HCC VIP Club for making the Valentines for Veterans. They were dropped off by Ms. Lappel at David Buchwald's office and distributed and widely appreciated. And of course, we have our 2018 National Merit finalists. We had 5 Byram Hills High School seniors who were named finalists out of 1.5 million juniors who took the test, and 15,000 of which were named finalists. Rachel Ackerman, John Duarte, Stella Lee, Jack Lorenzo, Jonathan Morey. So congratulations to you. And since its inception in '95, you should also know that we've had 134 semifinalists and 121 finalists. It's pretty outstanding. Yeah. Congratulations to those seniors. I'm happy for you. And we have our science research. Students will be attending Upstate New York Junior Science Humanities Symposium. It is tomorrow, so we made a mad dash, and those 2 of the children who are presenting are going up tonight instead. We are not going to be stopped by the snow.
Wow, okay.
Yes. And they are going to be presenting and competing to go on to nationals. And our entire senior class of 31 will be attending the Westchester Science and Engineering Fair March 17th in Sleepy Hollow High School, presenting their work in posters and competing for prizes. We have a lot going on in science and engineering. We did hear about Lisa Pellegrino as the recipient of the NCWIT Award for Aspirations in Computing Educator. Join me in congratulating, these are, I keep seeing these names, Ali Bracado, Alexandra Svern, and Marina Triebenbacher, yes, who were selected as 2018 Hudson Valley Affiliate winners of the same award for Aspirations in Computing. And really, the students have been selected as affiliate honor mentions, 11 from that group as well. So I don't know, I mean, I want to count the number of hours at board meetings altogether that I've been speaking of the accolades of our children, but I'm just thrilled for them. And then Saturday, I would just like to point out that our theater honors inductees, former students, there will be 7 of them who are inducted. 2 will be coming, Jonathan Cerullo from 1978, and Andrew Eisenhower, my former student Andrew, year of 2000. Laura Brannigan is also being inducted. Jessie Mayu, who was a student of mine in 1998. Freya Krasnow, a student of mine in 1998 also. Tristan Zimmerman, former student from the year 2000. And Tom Virtue was not my student, 1975. But anyway, that'll be an exciting day. And Oklahoma this weekend.
That's right. It's going to be
That's
great.
good. It's a great place to be.
I heard the overture.
We just want the snow to go away so we can be at this great place.
I heard the overture being played. It lifts you out of your seat.
Yeah?
Good. Yeah, the trailers are amazing. And I love, thanks to BTV for putting that together. The trailers that I'm seeing on these high school performances are the most professional, wonderful.
Our Byram Hills musicals are great, but if you're a fan of musicals, all over the county, there's some great shows. So if you really like it, you can, every night, you can, for a couple of weeks, you can go see a different Broadway show and come away feeling like you got your money's worth. It really, it's such talented kids we have running around. Of course, more in Byram Hills than any other district, but still, many talented children.
They usually draw my father in from Florida. That's how good they are.
Thank
So
you.
good.
No other...
That's it for me.
Okay, no staff reports. Okay, and then board reports. I'm just going to say that Lori and Jen and I both attended the West Putt and Lower Hudson Education Coalition Advocacy Points networking dinner not too long ago, which was interesting. And I am going to attend, I don't know if anybody else is going to go, the negotiations workshop that's coming up again.
Yes, I am.
This month, okay, great. And does anybody have any board reports?
The only thing that I have quickly is Lori and I went to the School Board Association evening where we meet the Westchester delegation, so all the state senators and assemblymen. And they're generally supportive of schools in our region. We've run into issues in Albany, from some other regions. But we talked about a couple of the issues already in the context of the budget. The only thing that I think we didn't speak about, the APPR moratorium, which is going to be lifted in 1920, although there's no clarity yet in terms of...
No, 2000.
1920 school year.
School year, got
Yeah,
it.
school year 1920. I had it right. There was a method behind my madness. The one thing that we heard, which was interesting, because it's the first time I heard it, is that there is a school of thought emerging in Albany that they may increase the length of the moratorium. So literally just like kick the can down the road rather than figuring out.
There was a survey that they put out, gave very short notice for the survey, which I took. It took me 30 minutes to complete it. And I sent it to all of our faculty, telling them my thoughts on the survey and if they wanted to fill it out so we can at least be a strong voice in the region.
Good.
I also sent that out to my regional network, saying, here's my opinion, but have your own.
The takeaway from that evening was we have tremendous support from our legislative, from our local legislature.
Yeah, that's right. And then the other expense item that came up, understandably so, is just school security and the fact that really the state is not, doing a lot for us from an economic standpoint on school security. We're clearly going to do what we need to do here locally because there's no priority that's higher, but certainly lobbying for the state to step up to continue to support schools in this regard, given the current environment, is critical. So that lobbying will happen and we should continue to do it, but obviously we've got to take care of ourselves here first and foremost.
It sort of seems that the trend will be there'll be some other mandate that comes down about it, so someone feels like they're doing something, but it'll be unfunded. It's a trend that I'm suspecting, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Lori and I went to Mary Beth Quibby with a proposal to do a preschool parent coffee, principal's coffee that really focused on incoming students. And initially started out as trying to drum up some preschool support for the BHEF gala, But the timing is not going to work out for that, unfortunately. But it's, I think it's a great idea. I have my last kid going through SOS right now, and when you go to the SOS program, and not all incoming kids go through SOS, but even when you do, it's for the kids, it's not for the parents. And there is a kindergarten orientation, but it's a big group setting. It's you're not getting a tour of the school. You're not getting a lot of your anxieties discussed in a very informal type of setting. So that's what we proposed to her, and she loved the idea. So we've been working with her, and we've got a coffee scheduled for April 11th. What time the date? April 11th at 9:30.
Pre-budget, so we thought we could also introduce them to how important it is to vote
vote.
on budget and show them ideas about the new indoor playgrounds and show how they're really going to be affected by all the wonderful things that are going on in Common Hill.
So Mary Beth had asked us, I'm doing a flyer, and we're going to put the flyer, Mary Beth's going to put it in the Common Hill newsletter, just to, whoever sees it. We're going to put it in the Preschool Association blast. We're going to do a blast. We have a bunch of places that we're going to
And notify
put
some
it.
of the
Our
local
moms.
preschools.
Right, oh, yeah, of course, that's perfect.
We can put it out with the realtors, local realtors, some any local businesses.
And kindergarten registration night.
Kindergarten registration, we can go
Of
to,
course.
we can drop off flyers at the preschools. So we're excited to see how it goes, and if it goes well, then it's something we'll do every year. The timing is what it is because the kindergarten orientation is this week.
This Thursday.
Yeah, it's supposed to be this week. We'll see if it happens. But Mary Beth had asked us not to plan anything before that because we didn't want to confuse parents and have them think that, oh, they're going to this coffee, they don't need to go to the kindergarten registration. We're trying to not have overlap in terms of topics.
Right.
The topics that we're going to discuss at the coffee are going to be things like the anxieties that parents have about their kids going to kindergarten. I've never seen the school. What happens when they go to the cafeteria? Do I send them lunch? What happens if I don't send them lunch? How's my kindergarten going to know where to go? How do they know which classroom to go to when they get off the bus? What if they get on the wrong bus? Like that type of anxiety as opposed to the kindergarten registration stuff.
No.
Yeah,
So we're excited,
initiative. I love it.
right?
Yeah.
So we're excited, and if it goes well, we'll do something Mary Beth wants to do every year. So.
Awesome.
So then the Education Foundation Gala is March 23rd.
So buy your tickets.
That's right, buy your tickets.
Weather permitting.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you, Scott, for
Winter might
taking
be
care
over.
of the ad for
Oh,
us
you're
to
welcome.
the Journal. Appreciate that.
And then March 15th, I believe I'm going also through West Putt to that legal meeting.
good.
So
Okay.
I will come back with some information on some of the new laws coming down the pike and how they're addressing situations and so
I think it's
on.
great that you guys are doing this stuff, really. Thank you. I think it's great.
Bring it back to us, it's really
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah.
Any other? Okay, thank you. Any topics for future agendas, requests for information? Communications to the board, we had a few. Everyone has gotten everyone we have received, at least that I've received. There was something a while back for a vendor had sent, and I sent it on to the business office. Jim? Sorry. Let's see, we had a student civic engagement letter. I responded to that, and you were all CC'd on that. There was one additional letter that came about the theater naming from someone previously who had requested that. I responded to that. Any other communications? Okay. Let's see, minutes. Can I have a motion to approve our Board of Education minutes from February 6, 2018?
So moved.
And a second? We're pretty hearty. Any changes? Comments
Good
on
job
that?
on those.
Yep. All in favor? Thank you, Donna. Yeah, it was a hearty one. Okay, and so we did exec beforehand. Yeah, exactly what we did. We said we already did 3.1, which was a personnel matter, individual employee. 3.2, contract matter, retired employees. 3.3, contract matter, individual employee. 3.4, contract matter, consultant agreement. 3.5, contract matter, individual employee. Was 3.6 the one that contract matter, individual employee, we're tabulating that to a later meeting. And 3.7, committee matter emergency response team. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Before we do, one last thing.
Yes?
Congratulations. We're very proud of you. You have a great career ahead of you. Good luck with it.
We will miss you around this table, but
Yeah.
you won't miss
I know.
this. You won't be missing this. It's like,
I love it.
you'll be back here, but you'll be back facing us, right?
Thank you.
We have a few more
Looking
meetings
forward to it.
though before
Yeah, that's
that.
right.
Okay.
So moved.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Good night, thank you for watching.
And it still says 8 to 12 inches, so I was right.
Hopefully it didn't
No
start.
school tomorrow.
Starting when?
8
Sue?
to 12 inches, starting around
Just
midnight.
kidding, yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you. Hi, Susan.